Kwon Ji-young. Before the name G-Dragon became a global brand, before fashion houses chased him, before stadiums screamed his lyrics back at him word for word, there was just a kid. Small frame, sharp eyes, standing in rooms far bigger than he was. He entered the industry when most kids were still learning how to be kids, 6 years old. 6. While others played, he trained. While others dreamed, he worked. SM Entertainment first, then YG. And YG was not glamorous back then. It wasn't polished, it was raw, rough, and unforgiving. But that environment forged something different in him. Not an idol, a creator. Training years passed, friends came and went, some debuted, some disappeared. He stayed, not because it was easy, because quitting wasn't an option. When Big Bang was formed, nothing was guaranteed. They didn't fit the idol mold. They weren't synchronized dolls. They were loud, flawed, emotional, sometimes chaotic. And G-Dragon? He wasn't the tallest, he wasn't the strongest vocalist, but he had something the industry couldn't manufacture: vision. From the beginning, he wasn't just performing music, he was building identity. He wrote, he composed, he produced. At a time when idols were expected to smile and obey, he insisted on creating. That alone made him dangerous. Big Bang's early days were not instant success. There was criticism, mockery. People said they were ugly, said they wouldn't last, said they weren't idol material. But then the music spoke. Haru Haru, Lies, Last Farewell. Songs that didn't just chart, they stayed. Songs that lived in people's memories. G-Dragon wasn't writing hits. He was writing emotions people didn't know how to say. And suddenly, Big Bang wasn't just a group, they were a movement. But success has a price. The more Big Bang rose, the heavier the weight became, especially on the leader. Leadership isn't about authority, it's about responsibility. When things went right, the praise was shared. When things went wrong, the blame had a name: G-Dragon. As a leader, he carried not only his own pressure, but everyone else's too. Every scandal, every delay, every misstep. And yet, he kept producing. Then came his solo career. This was the real test, because being successful in a group is one thing, standing alone is another. Heartbreaker. The song exploded. So did the controversy. Plagiarism accusations, public scrutiny, media attacks. For someone else, this would have ended everything. For him, it refined him. Instead of backing down, he doubled down on originality. He leaned into experimentation. He pushed boundaries harder. Coup d'etat, Crooked, Who You. These weren't safe songs, they were honest songs. Crooked wasn't about perfection, it was about loneliness, about fame without comfort, about being surrounded and still feeling empty. And people felt it because it was real. As a soloist, G-Dragon didn't just sell albums, he sold out tours, world tours. A Korean solo artist commanding global stages, not as an idol, but as an artist. And while the industry celebrated him on the surface, the pressure behind the scenes was relentless. Every outfit analyzed, every word dissected, every silence questioned. He became more than a musician. He became a symbol. Fashion followed him, not because he wore trends, but because he created them. Chanel didn't choose him, he redefined what a Chanel muse could look like. Gender norms broken, idol rules ignored, Korean masculinity stereotypes shattered. He made it okay to be soft, eccentric, emotional, strange. But icons don't get to rest. Military enlistment came, a pause the public saw as silence, but internally it was reflection. When Big Bang returned, The world had changed. The industry was faster, younger, more disposable. But legends don't expire. Even through scandals, personal, group-related, industry-wide, G-Dragon remained standing. Quiet sometimes, absent at times, but never erased. Because influence doesn't disappear just because you step back. You see it in younger idols who cite him as their reason for entering music. You hear it in production styles. You feel it in fashion weeks. You notice it in the way idols now demand creative control. That shift, that started with him. Big Bang's legacy is not just numbers, though the numbers are massive. It's longevity, its relevance across generations, its emotional connection. They weren't perfect, they were human, and G-Dragon, at the center of it all, carried the contradictions of fame like armor and wounds at the same time. A child star who never fully got to be a child, a leader who often stood alone, an artist praised globally but questioned constantly at home. Success didn't save him, it shaped him. And maybe that's why his music lasts, because it was never about being liked, it was about being honest. And as long as honesty matters in music, the name G-Dragon will never fade. There's a moment that rarely gets talked about: the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that comes after applause fades, after the lights shut off, after the stage empties. For G-Dragon, silence has always been loud, because when you peak early, the world never stops asking one question: what's next? Not, are you okay? Not, are you tired? Just, what's next? As Big Bang's popularity exploded, expectations became a prison. Every comeback had to be bigger. Every song had to outperform the last. Every era had to reinvent the industry. And reinvention sounds glamorous until you're the one expected to bleed creativity on demand. G-Dragon wasn't just writing for himself. He was writing for a group, for a company, for an entire generation watching him as proof that idols could be artists. That kind of pressure doesn't inspire, it consumes. There were nights he didn't sleep, days he rewrote songs dozens of times, moments he questioned whether anything he made was good enough anymore. Because once you set the standard, you're trapped by it. People forget this part. G-Dragon grew up under judgment. From a young age, he was told what to wear, how to act, how to sound. Then suddenly, he was told to be original, but only in ways that were acceptable. He refused. That refusal cost him peace. The media didn't just critique his work, they dissected his personality, called him arrogant, called him problematic, called him too much. But too much is often what scares people who play it safe. He blurred lines deliberately between idol and artist, between masculine and feminine, between mainstream and underground. And every time he did, the backlash followed. Yet, somehow, the music kept coming. Big Bang's group releases became cultural events, not promotions, events. Fans didn't just listen, they waited. Because Big Bang didn't release music often, they released when it meant something. And G-Dragon understood timing like a CEO understands markets. Scarcity builds value. Silence builds anticipation. Quality builds loyalty. That's why their songs aged well. They weren't chasing trends, they were setting emotional timestamps. But success doesn't shield you from loss. As years passed, cracks showed. Friendships strained, public scandals shook the group's image, and suddenly the same public that praised them demanded explanations. Leadership in those moments is brutal, because you can't speak freely, you can't explain everything. You carry responsibility without the right to defend yourself. G-Dragon absorbed it. He went quieter, more introspective, less visible. People mistook that for decline. It wasn't. It was survival. During his solo concerts, something became clear. When the crowd sang his lyrics back to him, it wasn't hype, it was understanding. Songs like Untitled 2014 weren't about stardom, they were apologies, confessions, regrets wrapped in melody. That song alone told the truth many idols never say out loud. Success doesn't guarantee happiness. Sometimes it delays healing. And yet, even in vulnerability, his influence grew. Younger idols began writing their own music, fighting for credits, demanding creative control. That wasn't coincidence. That was legacy in motion. G-Dragon didn't just change sound, he changed power dynamics. Before him, idols were products. After him, idols could be producers, CEOs of their own identity. Fashion houses didn't just invite him, they studied him because he understood branding before branding became a buzzword in K-pop. He turned personal taste into global aesthetics, turned self-expression into currency. And still, the loneliness remained. Because when you become a symbol, people stop seeing the person. They project, they expect, they consume, and the artist behind the image disappears. That's why his absences matter. Every hiatus, every pause, every delayed comeback, they weren't failures, they were boundaries. In an industry that burns people fast, G-Dragon chose longevity over constant visibility. That choice confused people, but it preserved him. Big Bang, as a group, became something rare in K-pop, a legacy act that still mattered. Not nostalgia, not replay value, relevance. And G-Dragon remains the axis around which that legacy rotates, not because he demands it, but because influence doesn't need noise. It shows up quietly in who people imitate, not who they hype. At this point, his story isn't about charts, it's about impact, about a kid who entered the industry too early, grew up under pressure, broke rules that weren't meant to be broken, and paid for it publicly, and still chose art. Not perfection, not safety, art. That's why fans don't just support him, they protect him, because they know the cost, and because deep down, they're not waiting for a comeback, they're waiting for him on his terms.